All right, welcome back. We are up to book 11, going through the sermons of Peter. So we'll go ahead and get started. Therefore, on the fourth day at Tripolis, Peter, rising and finding us awake, saluted us and went out to the reservoir that he might bathe and pray, and we did also so after him. To us, therefore, when we had prayed together and were sat down before him, he gave a discourse touching the necessity of purity. And when thereafter it was day, he permitted the multitudes to enter. Then, when a great crowd had entered, he saluted them according to custom, and began to speak. Inasmuch as, by long continued neglect on your part, to your own injury, your mind has caused to sprout many hurtful conceptions about religion, and you have become like fallow by the carelessness of husbandmen. You need a long time for your purification, that your mind, receiving like good seed the true word that has been imparted to you, may not choke it with evil cares and render it unfruitful with respect to works that are able to save you. Wherefore it behooves those who are careful of their own salvation to hear more constantly, that their sins which have been long multiplying may, in the short time that remains, be matched with constant care for their purification. Since therefore no one knows the time of his end, hasten to pluck out the many thorns of your hearts, but not by little and little, for then you cannot be purified, for you have been long fallow. But not otherwise will you endure to undertake much care for your purification, unless you be angry with yourselves, and chastise yourselves for those things with which as unprofitable servants you have been ensnared, consenting to your evil lusts, that you may be able to let in your righteous indignation upon your mind as fire upon a fallow field. If therefore you have not righteous indignation against evil lust, learn from what good things you have been seduced, and by whom you have been deceived, and for what punishment you are prepared, and thus your mind being sober and kindled into indignation like fire by the teaching of him who sent us, may be able to consume the evil things of lust. Believe me, that if you will, you can rectify all things. You are the image of the invisible God, whence let not those who would be pious say that idols are images of God, and therefore that it is right to worship them. For the image of God is man, and he who wishes to be pious toward God does good to man, because the body of man bears the image of God. But all do not as yet bear his likeness, but the pure mind of the good soul does. However, as we know that man was made after the image and likeness of God, we tell you to be pious toward him, that the favor may be accounted as done to God, whose image he is. Therefore it behooves you to give honor to the image of God, which is man. In this wise, food to the hungry, drink to the thirsty, clothing to the naked, care to the sick, shelter to the stranger, and visiting him who is in prison, to help him as you can. And not to speak at length whatever good things anyone wishes for himself, so let him afford to another in need. And then a good reward can be reckoned to him as being pious towards the image of God. And like the reason, if he will not undertake to do those things, he shall be punished as neglecting the image. Can it therefore be said that for the sake of piety toward God you worship every form, while in all things you injure man, who is really the image of God, committing murder, adultery, stealing, and dishonoring him in many other respects? But you ought not to do even one evil thing on account of which man is grieved. But now you do all things on account of which man is disheartened, for wrong is also distress. Wherefore you murder and spoil his goods, and whatever else you know which you would not receive from another. But you, being seduced by some malignant reptile to malice, by the suggestion of polytheistic doctrine, are impious toward the real image, which is man, and think that you are pious towards senseless things. But some say, unless he wishes these things to be, they shall not be, but he would take them away. But I say this shall assuredly be the case, when all shall show their preference for him, and thus there shall be a change of the present world. However, if you wished him to act thus, so that none of the things that are worshipped should subsist, tell me what of existing things you have not worshipped. Do not some of you worship the sun, and some the moon, some water, and some the earth, and some the mountains, and some plants, and some seeds, and some also man, as in Egypt? Therefore God must have suffered nothing, not even you, so that there should have been neither worshipped nor worshipper. Truly, this is what the terrible serpent which lurks in you would have, and spares you not. But so it shall be. For it is not the thing that is worshipped that sins, for it suffers violence at the hands of him who will worship it. For though unjust judgment is passed by all men, yet not by God. For it is not just that the sufferer and the disposer receive the same punishment, unless he willingly receive the honor which belongs only to the most honorable. But it will be said, the worshippers themselves ought to be taken away by the true God, and others may not do it. But you are not wiser than God, that you should give him counsel as one more prudent than he. He knows what he does, for he is long-suffering to all who are in piety. As a merciful and philanthropic father, knowing that impious men become pious, and of those very worshippers of base and senseless things, many become sober, have ceased to worship these things and to sin, and many Greeks have been saved so as to pray to the true God. But you say God ought to have made us at first, so that we should not have thought at all of such things. You who would say this do not know what is free will, and how it is possible to be really good, that he who is good by his own choice is really good. But he who is made good by another under necessity is not really good, because he is not what he is by his own choice. Since therefore everyone's freedom constitutes the true good and shows the true evil, God has contrived that friendship or hostility should be in each man by occasions. But no, it is said, everything that we think he makes us to think. Stop. Why do you blaspheme more and more in saying this? For if we are under his influence in all that we think, you say that he is the cause of fornications and lust and avarice and all blasphemy. Cease your evil speaking, you who ought to speak well of him and bestow all honor upon him. And do not say, God does not claim any honor. For if he himself claims nothing, you ought to look at what is right, and to answer with thankful voice him who does you good in all things. But you say, we do better when we are thankful at once to him and to all others. Now when you say this, you do not know the plot that is formed against you. For as when many physicians of no power promise to cure one patient, one who is really able to cure him does not apply his remedy, considering that if he should cure him, the others would get the credit. So also God does not do you good when he is asked along with many who can do nothing. What, it will be said, is God enraged at this? If when he cures another gets the credit? I answer, although he be not indignant at all events, he will not be an accomplice in deceit. For when he has conferred a benefit, the idol which has done nothing is credited with the power. But also I say to you, if he who crouches in adoration before senseless idols had not been injured naturally, perhaps he would have endured even this. Wherefore watch you, that you may attain to a reasonable understanding on the matter of salvation. For God, being without want, neither himself needs anything, nor receives hurt, for it belongs to us to be profited or injured. For in like manner as Caesar is neither hurt when he is evil spoken of, nor profited when he is thanked, but safely accrues to the render of thanks and ruin to the evil speaker, so that they who speak well of God indeed profit him nothing, but save themselves. In like manner those who blaspheme him do not injure him, but themselves perish. But it will be said that the cases are not parallel between God and man, and I admit that they are not parallel, for the punishment is greater to him who is guilty of impiety against the greater, and less to him who sins against the less. As therefore God is greatest of all, so he who is impious against him shall endure greater punishment, as sinning against the greater, not through his defending himself with his own hand, but the whole creation being indignant at him, and naturally taking vengeance on him. For to the blasphemer the sun will not give its light, nor the earth her fruits, nor the fountain its water, nor in Hades shall he who is there constituted prince give rest to the soul, since even now, while the constitution of the world subsists, the whole creation is indignant at him. Wherefore neither do the clouds afford sufficient rains, nor the earth fruits, whereby many perish, yea, even the air itself, inflamed with anger, is turned to pestilential courses. However, whatsoever good things we enjoy, he of his mercy compels the creature to our benefits. Still against you who dishonor the Maker of all, the whole creation is hostile. And though by the dissolution of the body you should escape punishment, how shall you be able by corruption to flee from your soul, which is incorruptible? For the soul, even of the wicked, is immortal, for whom it were better not to have it incorruptible, for being punished with endless torture under unquenchable fire, and never dying, it can receive no end of its misery. But perhaps someone of you will say, you terrify us, O Peter. Teach us then how we can be silent about these things, and yet tell you things as they are, for not otherwise can we tell you them. But if we should be silent, you should be ensnared by evils through ignorance. But if we speak, we are suspected of terrifying you with false theory. How then shall we charm that wicked serpent that lies in your soul, and subtlety insinuates suspicious, hostile to God, under the guise of love of God? Be reconciled with yourselves, for in order that your salvation recourse is to him with good works, unreasonable lust in you is hostile to God, for by conceit of wisdom it strengthens ignorance. But others say, God does not care for us. This is also false, for if he really did not care, he would neither cause his sun to rise on the good and the evil, nor send his rain on the just and the unjust. But others say we are more pious than you, since we worship both him and images. I do not think if one were to say to a king, I give you an equal share of honor with that which I give to corpses and to worthless dung. I do not think he would profit by it. But someone will say, do you call our objects of worship dung? I say, yes. For you have made them useless to yourselves by setting them aside to worship, whereas their substance might perhaps have been serviceable to some other purpose, or for the purpose of manure. But now it is not useful even for this purpose, since you have changed its shape and worship it. And how do you say that you are more pious, who have the most wicked of all, who deserve destruction for your souls by the very one incomparable sin at the hands of him who is true, if you abide in it? For as if any son, having received many benefits from his father, gives to another, who is not his father, the honor that is due his father, he is certainly disinherited. But if he live according to the judgment of his father, and so thanks him for his kindnesses, he is with good reason made the heir. But others will say, we shall act impiously if we forsake the objects of worship handed down to us by our fathers. For it is like the guarding of a deposit. But on this principle, the son of a robber or a debauchee ought not to be sober or to choose a better part, lest he should act impiously and sin by doing differently from his parents. How foolish, then, are they who say, we worship these things that we may not be troublesome to him, as if God were troubled by those who bless him, and not troubled by those who ungratefully blaspheme him. Why is it then that when there is a withholding of rain, you look only to heaven and pour out prayers and supplications, and when you obtain it, you quickly forget? For when you have reaped your harvest, or gathered your vintage, you distribute your first fruits among those idols which are nothing, quickly forgetting God your benefactor, and thus you go into groves and temples and offer sacrifices and feasts. Wherefore some of you say these things have been excellently devised for the sake of good cheer and feasting. O men without understanding, judge you rightly of what is said. For if it were necessary to give oneself to some pleasure for the refreshment of the body, whether it were better to do so among the rivers and woods and groves, where there are entertainments and convivialries and shady places, or where there is the madness of demons and cuttings of hands and emasculations and fury and mania and disheveling of hair and shoutings and enthusiasm and howling and all those things which are done with hypocrisy for the confounding of the unthinking, when you offer your prescribed prayers and thanksgivings even to those who are deader than the dead. And why do you take pleasure in these doings, since the serpent which lurks in you, which has sown your fruitless lust, will not tell you, I shall speak and put it on record. Thus the case stands. According to the worship of Yahweh, the proclamation is made to be sober, to be chaste, to restrain passion, not to pilfer other men's goods, to live uprightly, moderately, fearlessly, gently, rather to restrain oneself in necessities than to supply his wants by wrongfully taking away the property of another. But with the so-called gods, the reverse is done. There is, then, something of the justly commanded things in falsehood. Although even if you kept all the commandments, one thing that you do not know, Yahweh would be sufficient to issue a death sentence against you. But meeting together in the places which you have dedicated to them, you delight in making yourselves drunk, and you kindle your altars, of which are the diffused odor, through its influence attracts the blind and the deaf spirits to the place of their fumigation. And thus of those who are present, some are filled with inspirations, and some with strange fiends, and some betake themselves to lasciviousness, and some to theft and murder. For the exaltation of blood and the libation of wine satisfy even these unclean spirits, which lurk within you and cause you to take pleasure in the things that are transacted there, and in dreams surround you with false fantasies and punish you with myriads of diseases. For under the show of the so-called sacred victims you are filled with dire demons, which cunningly conceal themselves and destroy you, so that you shall not understand the plot that is laid for you. For under the guise of some injury, or love, or anger, or grief, or strangling you with a rope, or drowning you, or throwing you for a precipice, or by suicide, or apoplexy, or some other disease, they deprive you of life. But none of us can suffer such a thing, but they themselves are punished by us, when, having entered into anyone, they entreat us that they may go out slowly. But someone will say, perhaps even some of the worshippers of God fall under such sufferings. I say that it is impossible, for he is a worshipper of God, of whom I speak, who is truly pious, not one who is such only in name, but who really performs the deeds of the law and has been given him. If anyone acts impiously, he is not pious, in like manner as if he who is of another tribe keeps the law, he is a Judean, but he who does not keep it is a Greek. For the Judean believes God and keeps the law, by which faith he removes also other sufferings, though like mountains and heavy. But he who keeps not the law is manifestly a deserter, through not believing God, and thus is no Judean, but a sinner. He is, on account of his sin, brought into subjection to those sufferings which are ordained for the punishment of sinners. But by the will of God, prescribed at the beginning, punishment righteously follows those who worship him on account of transgressions, and this is so, in order that, having reckoned with them by punishment for sin as for a debt, he may set forth those who have turned to him pure in the universal judgment. For as the wicked here enjoy luxury and the loss of eternal blessings, so the punishments are sent upon the Judeans who transgress for a settlement of accounts, that, expiating their transgression here, they may be set free from eternal punishments. But you cannot speak thus, for you do not believe that things are then as we say, I mean, when there is a recompense for all. And on this account you being ignorant of what is advantageous, are seduced by temporal pleasures from taking hold of eternal things. Wherefore we attempt to make to you exhibitions of what is profitable, that being convinced of the promises that belong to piety, you may by good works inherit with us the world of no grief. Until then, you know us, do not be angry with us, as if we speak falsely of the good things which we desire for you. For the things which are regarded by us as true and good, these we have not scrupled to bring to you, but on the contrary have hastened to make you fellow heirs of good things, which we have considered to be such. For thus it is necessary to speak to the unbelievers, but that we really speak the truth in what we say, you cannot know otherwise than by first listening with love of the truth. Wherefore, as the matter is in hand, although in 10,000 ways, the serpent that lurks in you, suggesting evil reasoning and hindrances, wishes to ensnare you. Therefore, so much the more ought you to resist him, and to listen to us assiduously. For it behooves you, consulting as having been grievously deceived, to know that he must be charmed. But in no way is it possible. But by charming, I mean setting yourselves by reason in opposition to the evil counsels, remembering that by promise of knowledge he brought death into the world at the first. When the prophet of truth, knowing that the world was much in error, and seeing it ranged on the side of evil, did not choose that there should be peace to it while it stood in error, so that till the end he sets himself against those who are in concord with wickedness, setting truth over against fallacy, sending as it were fire on those who are sober, namely wrath against the seducer, which is likened to a sword. And by holding forth the word he destroys ignorance by knowledge, cutting as it were, and separating the living from the dead. Therefore, while wickedness is being conquered by lawful knowledge, war has taken hold of all. For the submissive son is, for the sake of salvation, separated from the unbelieving father, or the father from the son, or the mother from the daughter, or the daughter from the mother, and relatives from relatives, and friends from associate. And let no one say, how is this just, that parents should be separated from their children, and children from their parents? It is just, even entirely. For if they remained with them, and after profiting them nothing, were also destroyed along with them, how is it not just that he who wishes to be saved should be separated from him who will not, but who wishes to destroy him along with himself? Moreover, it is not those who judge better that wish to be separated, but they wish to stay with them, and profit them by the exposition of better things, and therefore the unbelievers, not wishing to hearken to them, make war against them, banishing, persecuting, and hating them. But those who suffer these things, pitying those who are ensnared by ignorance, by the teaching of wisdom, pray for those who contrive evil against them, having learned that ignorance is the cause of their sin. For the teacher himself, being nailed to the cross, prayed to the Father that the sin of those who slew him might be forgiven, saying, Father, forgive their sins, they do not know what they do. They also, therefore, being imitators of the teacher in their sufferings, pray for those who contrive them, as they have been taught. Therefore they are not separated as hating their parents, since they make constant prayers even for those who are neither parents nor relatives, but enemies, and strive to love them as they have been commanded. So I think this is a good place to take a break. So we'll pick up in chapter 21 when we come back. Shalom.